I'm Nathan Scott, and this is Breakdown, a series on game design.
Fighting games, more so than a lot of other genres, require knowing a lot about the game before you can even be decent at them. A lot of them rely on the player to memorize combos and execute them very consistently. A lot of people enjoy that, and that's great, but some of the best fighting games don't have any combos, or at least no complex button-based combos. Nidhogg is one of my favorite fighting games, partially because it has the perfect balance of simplicity while still having the same depth to it. There's a quote that's usually attributed to Albert Einstein that says, "Make things as simple as possible, but not simpler." In order to really win much in a game like Street Fighter, you have to spend a lot of time practicing combos. And I'm probably just bad at it, but I can't even consistently do easier combos with the buttons on screen. But once you have two players that both know all the combos facing off against each other, it becomes almost more of a strategy game. Each player has to predict their opponent's next move and figure out how to counter it. It's almost like playing speed chess. You have to think about where to move, when to attack, and how to press your advantages when you have them. Nidhogg kind of distills that into a game that anyone can access. Instead of having a separate series of buttons for every attack, it has 4 or 5 different moves that you can string together to make your own combos. But any given combo is just something like rolling into an attack. It only strings 1 or 2 moves together. There are a few somewhat difficult moves, like parrying, but none of them are really required. It lets players experience the strategy aspects of fighting games without the steep learning curve that sometimes makes people shy away from them. And it does that without losing too much complexity or strategy. In other words, it's about as simple as a fighting game can be. But there's 2 parts that Einstein quote. He said things should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. And I think trying to be too simple was one of the downfalls of a lot of the low-quality games on the Nintendo Wii. Fighting games with only motion controls are too far on the simple end of the spectrum. The Wii had several Star Wars fighting games, and the Clone Wars game was generally considered the worst one. It completely got rid of button-based attacks in favor of swinging the Wii remote, trying to appeal to younger players and more casual players. Don Norman, a pretty well-known designer, once tweeted that if something is simpler than possible, it is no longer simple. It becomes complicated, and therefore confusing. And that's exactly what happened to that game. The motion controls mean that you don't have to memorize anything, or even remember what any of the buttons do. But that actually made it less fun because it was hard to get any of your attacks to work right. And the game does have combos, but instead of them rewarding players who practiced more, they got in the way of everybody. Eurogamer, in their review, wrote that if you swing left, up, and right too slowly, you just do 3 slash moves. Do it too quickly, and the game can't keep up and ignores everything past the first movement. The game became complicated in their effort to make it simple. If the controls are too complicated, they're hard to memorize. But if they're not complicated enough, they can be inconsistent. Making them understandable is the most important part, because it makes everything else feel much less complicated. If the controls are hard to understand, they're not really simple at all. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching this episode of Breakdown.